I will.
Jim, very nice to meet you.
Expert. This person right here has been working in the world of audio for a few decades, and in that time he has seen things change from analog to digital. As a matter of fact, at NBC 739, James Alburger was the audio engineer. That's where we met just a few years ago. And he brought the idea of digital workstations, which we're learning with Adobe Audition, to 739. And you mentioned you were the first to do that here in San Diego.
Digital audio in San Diego, to my knowledge. I
That's,
don't think any of the recording studios even had digital at that point.
that's amazing. James is a sound editor. He's a mixer. He's an author. He wrote the book, The Art of Voice Acting. He's an 11-time Emmy-winning audio producer. You like to get that kind of cred. That's important stuff. He's a director, a performance coach. He helps people with voiceover, with production, and just all things audio. And we're just really excited to have you here. So we gave them 3 extra minutes. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you,
Good.
James.
Thank you. And I'm just going to put the microphone right down here, so it will hear me. It'll also pick up some of my keyboard stuff, but that's the way it is. Okay, well.
Do you want me to turn the lights off, James?
It might help the screen a little bit if you do that. And does that? No, okay, but it screws up the pictures, so. Can you all see the screen okay? Yeah. All right. Because what actually will be there is that. So if you can see that okay, then we're in good shape.
Yeah, they turned them all back on.
Can the front row be turned off, or do you?
Oh, you know what? One is. Okay, here's.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps a little bit. That just kind of dims it a bit.
No.
No. Okay, messes up the white balance. Oh well. Okay. Okay. Well, first off, welcome everybody. Jodina was nice enough to give you a very elaborate introduction for me, which I really appreciate. That's nice. Yeah, we have known each other for a while. My background, I'll give you a really quick recap on my background. I started in audio because when I was 12 years old, I was getting into magic and performing. And I realized that I was really uncomfortable talking in front of an audience and doing my routines, my magic with speaking. But I really liked music, and I had played clarinet for a little while, so I knew music. I had some albums that I really liked. I really enjoyed instrumentals. And I learned pretty quickly that I could take a recording off of a record, and you all know what records are? Okay, just checking. We're in 2024 here, so it's a record. What's a record? Old vinyl records. And I would take the music off the record, and I would work my magic routines to that music. And I'd get to a point where I wanted to take my magic performance in one direction, but the music was going in a different direction. But later on in that music track, it went to where I wanted to go. There was a flourish or something in the music that enhanced what I was doing with my magic. So I literally taught myself to edit music with a pair of scissors, a grease pencil, and some Scotch tape. And I got those instructions from the inside of a box of audio recording tape. Because back in those days, we recorded on analog recording tape, that's a whole other class just on how analog worked. But that's how I got started. And as I was going through high school, I would end up doing projects for my friends, audio projects for some of their classes, got into television in junior college and at San Diego State, where I graduated from film and television production. But at San Diego State, I avoided the video side as much as I could. I just stayed as much in the audio side. And just kept honing my skills and graduated, got into a recording studio in Hollywood, where I learned more in the year that I was at that recording studio than I had learned in all the time since I first started working with audio. Took me to a whole new level. And then left the recording studio, came to San Diego, got the job at Channel 39, where I was immediately brought in as the audio engineer for their newscast, which had just started, and started doing the audio production for commercials, for programs that we did locally, and of course the live newscasts. And over the years, I ended up designing a television audio truck for remote recording and remote production, 2 television control rooms for audio, which went along with the video control room with the big switcher. And the audio control rooms that I designed were completely isolated from the production control room, so that I was able to actually hear what was going on with the sound in the shows or commercials or whatever it was I was working on. And that also gave me a production audio room where I could do audio production before it went into actual video, or I could be editing the video for whatever we're doing, and do that separately from anything. I wasn't disturbing the video guys at all. And what I learned back in those days was that a lot of TV stations have the audio control in the production control room, which I never could understand why they did that, because it just made no sense. Because, you know, how can you really hear what's going on with your show when you've got, you know, a half dozen producers on talkback talking to different remote sources and different talent, and there's a lot of commotion going on in the production control room. If you've never been in a TV production control room, try and get in there, because it's an experience not to be missed. And you might look at it as total chaos, because that's it from the outsider's perspective. That's what it looks like. It's just craziness. I mean, you've got all these people doing all these different things, and then you've got the audio guy trying to make the sound work and keep all the mics balanced and keep it sounding good. It's just nuts. But when I have the audio room separate, I could turn up my volume as loud as I wanted. I could really hear the detail in the sound. It just made a huge difference. And then early 1990s, I brought digital audio in. This was the beginning of digital sound, early 1990s, around 1992, 93, back in those days. And I would go to the National Association of Broadcasters convention. Any of you familiar with that, with what that convention is? Okay, it's an annual convention held in Las Vegas every year, usually I think in April. And it's one of the biggest conventions in the country. And it's all about broadcasting. Anything you could even think of remotely related to broadcasting is there. And I would go to those every year just because I was technically the audio supervisor at Channel 39 at that time, which is now Cable 7. And I needed to learn about what was going on in television sound and audio. So I was researching music libraries, microphones, audio cables, audio equipment, digital tape recorders, and I discovered there were a bunch of digital companies that were just starting to start up back in those days. And I would visit those vendors and learn about digital audio. So again, I'm teaching myself about digital audio because there were no classes like this back in those days. And I found this one company that made the most sense to me because I'm moving from analog audio into digital. Now with analog audio, we're actually physically cutting and splicing tape together, audio recording tape. So that's what's called destructive editing, because I actually take a piece of the physical tape out and throw it away because I don't need that part. And I put the two good pieces together, splice them together. It's a lot of what we do with digital editing. It's the same concept, but we're doing it electronically here as opposed to doing it physically with analog. And with all these new digital workstations coming in, a lot of them would take a digital recording, and when you edited the file, it actually damaged the recording. So that's called destructive editing. And I found this one company that basically the way they handled their editing was that their workstation basically looked at or took a picture of the analog file, brought that into the workstation, and we're editing the picture. So there is no destructive editing, totally non-destructive editing. And I really liked that concept, and ended up bringing 3 of their workstations into San Diego in 1993. And this was the first digital audio that I'm aware of that was ever brought into San Diego. I don't think any of the recording studios had digital at that point. I know none of the TV stations did. In fact, most of the TV stations had their audio control rooms, the audio control in the production control room. They weren't even isolated. So they couldn't even do audio production. But I came from a recording studio background before TV and loved production. And before bringing the digital in, I also brought 16-track analog audio into that station. So I had a 16-track reel-to-reel production machine that was time code locked to the videotape room. If you don't know about time code, Jodina will tell you about that later. Time code is fun because time code actually synchronizes, or it locks up multiple analog devices. Could be videotape machines, audio recorders, that sort of thing, and they all lock into the same time frame as they play back or record. And time code is still used today a lot, especially in location recording for film and for TV production that's on location. So if you ever watch a movie, all of the audio that goes into that movie, like all the dialogue, is recorded separately from the picture, but the recorder that's recording the sound is time code locked to the cameras, and it could be 5 or 6, 10 cameras that are recording the picture. So they're all on the same time. And what that allows the editors to do is they can go back into post-production and bring in the audio files, bring in the video files, and click a button, and everything synchronizes to the same time code. And that makes their editing super fast and super easy. So if you've got more questions about that, ask Jordina, she'll tell you.
I was always talent.
Oh, you're talent. Okay, never mind. Call me. Jordina will give you my number. You can call me. Anyhow, so today, what I would really like to get into is some production techniques, talk a little bit about editing, and really get into how music affects the outcome of the final product. So if you've got questions as we go along, raise your hand, and I'll try and answer your questions as we go, and I'll also we'll do a Q&A at the end of all of this. Yes, you have a question?
Which digital workstation did you bring into San Diego originally? I don't know if I heard the name.
It is a relatively unknown digital workstation. It's by a company called Microtechnology Unlimited. They're based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And it was called a micro editor, was the name of the workstation. And it was all DOS based. I mean, it was a Windows machine, but on the disk operating system. It was never brought into Windows. Well, actually it was brought into Windows, but it was really early Windows. But it was primarily DOS based when I started with it. And the thing that I liked about Micro Editor is that it was event-based editing. The other systems, as I mentioned, were mostly destructive editing, and they were waveform-based editing. What you see on the screen here, this is a waveform of an audio recording. We'll get into this in just a minute. But when you record something from analog to digital, this is what you end up with. You end up with the waveform. And the other systems would edit the wave. They'd actually be cutting the file and splitting that file into smaller files and reassembling those, which that's not what I liked. And what Micro Editor did was they created in their workstation, they would take a wave file and they would make, like I said, they basically took a picture of it, and that became an event in their workstation. And I really liked that idea because it just opened up a world of flexibility. for editing and production. And the software that I'm using here is event-based editing. In fact, all of the editing systems are now event-based editing. There are no destructive editing software out there. You guys are learning Adobe Audition. I use Vegas Video, which is a Windows-based software. That's why I'm on my PC and not on the classroom PC. And when I found in the early day, well, this is going back to early 2000s. So I'd been using Micro Editor for about 10 years. And Micro Editor was basically, they did not want to move out of DOS or out of the early Windows, and they didn't want to expand that capability. So they were basically closing down their editing division. Microtechnology Unlimited, just as a little bit of trivia, was in the 1990s and 2000s, was the #1 supplier of the electronic components for karaoke. So if any karaoke machine out there used Microtechnology hardware. And the digital audio workstation was the owner's, that was like his dream. He always wanted to have a digital audio workstation, even though he was dealing with the karaoke audio. That was his primary business. But then he closed down the workstation in the early 2000s, which meant I had to start looking for other software. And I looked at the Mac software. I looked at the other software for PCs, and I couldn't find anything that I felt really did what I wanted it to do, or what Micro Editor could do, until I came across this little company called SourceForge.
SoundForge.
Hmm?
SoundForge.
Right? SoundForge is the software. I think SourceForge was the name of the company back then. Anyhow, they had this little audio recording software called SoundForge, and they were just branching out into video editing, and they took the SoundForge audio components and put it with video, and they called it Vegas Video. And I found that about the 3rd version. So they'd had it out for a couple of years, but I didn't know about it because they weren't showing it at the convention, at the NAB convention. So I just found this one year, and I started playing with it, and bought a copy of Vegas Video and started playing with it, and realized it's event-based editing for not just audio, but also for video, for picture, which is exactly what you're all working with Adobe Audition. And if you get into Final Cut or any of the other video editing softwares, they're all event-based for both audio and video. So that pretty much gives you a background, which brings us up to the editing capabilities today. Digital audio is amazing. Most of the newer digital software is adding AI. So we've got AI technology coming into the editing systems. This version of Vegas that I'm working with is Vegas 22. I started at 3. So I've been with Vegas for a long, long time, and it keeps getting better and better every year. And they've just added some AI capabilities for this that I haven't really played with. Most of what I do with Vegas is audio, but there are some projects that I work on where I also do video editing, and I also use Vegas for that. I'll give you my website. So if you want to write this down, my website is Sigma Media. That's CIGMA media.com. And if you go to sigmamedia.com and look under the Our Work menu tab, you'll find a whole bunch of videos. Some of them are full-length feature films, a number of shorts, full-length shorts, but it's a lot of the production work that I've done both with video editing and with audio. So you can really get an idea of what I do and how it all comes together. There are also a couple of demo reels up there, one of which is all about audio post-production, primarily post-production for film and video. And that video has a lot of before and after examples. So you can see or hear, this is what the audio for this particular scene sounded like on set when it was originally recorded. And then I immediately follow that with, okay, this is how I fixed it and made it sound good. Because some of it is really bad. There was one director that contacted me. I met him at a meeting of a group called San Diego Filmmakers, which is no longer around, unfortunately. But I was at their meeting, and we did a round robin. Everybody introduced themselves, and this one director introduced himself and said, I have a film that I produced a few years ago, and I need some help with audio, so if any of you can do that, let me know. So I contacted him after the meeting, and he sent me the film. I looked at it and said, yeah, hey, I can fix your film. I can fix the audio on your film. However, what that means is we need to ADR the entire film. ADR stands for Automated Dialogue Replacement. And that's where we go back and we bring the actors back into a studio and they reenact their performance. And we're now 3 years later after he had shot and edited the film, and he had been putting it out in the film festivals and not getting any response. Nobody liked it. Well, understandably, because it sounded horrible. So I told him I could fix it. We'd have to ADR the entire film. And he said, okay. And all the actors were local. So he was able to bring all the actors into my studio. And we went through the entire movie and replaced all the dialogue. So if you listen to that ADR clip, you'll hear exactly what we did. Yes, sure. Yeah.
Will you be playing any of that? That would be awesome.
Do we have internet here?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if
That would be awesome. Or even at the end, if we go to mine.
Okay. Well, we'll take a break. So let me see if I can get on internet. I don't want to do that right now.
Yeah. A lot of the students in this class are film students.
Oh, perfect.
And so to be able to hear what you got and what you turned it into would be beautiful.
Awesome. We'll do that. We'll do that when we take the break. I'll get up on the internet and bring that up. Okay. One thing I did want to mention very early on, when I first took the microphone, you'll notice I laid the microphone down here on the table, and rather than holding the microphone. First off, I'm going to need both hands on the computer, so I can't be holding the microphone. I don't have a wireless mic with me. I didn't bring my wireless. But there's a technique with microphones called ground wave effect. And what the ground wave effect is, it refers to how sound waves travel through the atmosphere and along the ground. So with normally the way that you are hearing me is you hear my voice going through the air. I'm moving molecules as I speak. Those molecules hit your eardrums, get translated into sound in your brain, and you hear what I'm saying. Microphone does the same thing. It's basically converting the analog signal in the air into an electronic signal that gets recorded or gets reproduced over a PA system. But because the microphone is on a flat surface, what's happening is the sound waves from my mouth are going out of my mouth omnidirectionally, equally in all directions. So some of the sound waves are coming down and hitting the table. When they hit the countertop here, they come down and they all of a sudden now flatten out and they start to travel in a direct line. And so the microphone is aimed at me. My voice hits the table and goes directly into the microphone. So it's almost the same thing as holding the microphone up here where my sound is going directly into the mic, except I'm using this ground wave effect, which is it's just a phenomena of the way sound works. So that's how my voice is being recorded on this. Now, here's an interesting thing about that. If I was to take this microphone and tilt the microphone up, so now my voice is going into the microphone, but if I'm still over the ground surface, if I'm too close to the ground and I have the microphone tilted up, what happens with the sound wave is the sound wave is coming out of my mouth going directly into the mic. However, this is an omnidirectional microphone, so it's picking up audio in all directions equally. And there is sound wave hitting the table, traveling across the table, and coming up into the microphone from below. So what that potentially can do is create what's called phase cancellation. And all audio works as a sine wave. And you'll see that in the, there we go. On the audio here, you see all the audio here is basically a sine wave. So it has you notice there's a center line that goes through the middle. That's a baseline of basically 0. And then there's part of the waveform goes above and part of the waveform goes below. Let me see if I get a little bigger section here. There's a little better example. So this is what's called a sine wave or a sinusoidal wave. And what happens with phase cancellation is, and this is all in a relationship of time. So at any given moment of time, you've got a sound wave striking the diaphragm of the microphone. So if I have the microphone flat on the table for ground wave, the only signal of my voice that's going to hit the diaphragm of the mic is coming in straight from the front. So it's not getting any cancellation. The dominant sound is coming in flat. If I have the mic angled up, so there's sound coming in above and bouncing off the table coming in from below, the bounced sound is at a slightly different time than the sound coming in directly. So that shift in time creates a difference in the waveform, which can potentially create some cancellation. So certain frequencies may cancel each other out, which could cause the sound to go muddy or to go tinny or somehow artifact the way that particular sound sounds. So if you ever go to a live theater performance, not so much today, because in live theater, mostly today, everybody's on body mics. So, the sound man's got a huge console with, 37 different microphones coming into it, and he's got to juggle all of that. But in the older days, before we had those huge consoles and before wireless microphones were as prominent as they are now, the way theaters used sound was they would take some omnidirectional microphones and they would lay 3 or 4 microphones across the foot of the stage. And they'd have them on this little piece of foam rubber so that the head of the microphone is just about 1/8 of an inch above the actual surface of the stage. Those are ground wave microphones. And they picked up amazing sound. But that's how they did it. They would also have mics hanging over certain areas of the stage for like chorus pickup or pickups that were really far back. But it was the ground waves were their main primary microphones, and they worked really well. So I just wanted to briefly explain what that phenomena is so that you can plug that in the back of your mind. And if you're ever in a situation where you have to record some sound and you have an omnidirectional microphone, go for it. Try that out. It works in some unusual situations where you don't have the ability to record any other way. Okay, so any questions on any of this that I've covered so far? Because I'm going to be throwing a lot of stuff at you today. No questions? Okay, good. All right, so let's get into the project that I want to show you today. And as I mentioned, I'm using Vegas Video. So this software that you see on the screen is not going to look exactly like what you're using with Adobe Audition. However, the techniques and the processes are identical. So it doesn't really matter what software you are using if you understand the techniques. Changing software is simply a matter of learning, okay, what buttons do you push to achieve the end result you want? So there's a learning curve when you're changing software. But as far as the actual technique is concerned, it's exactly the same. So that's what I'm going to talk about today is some of the production techniques. I'll talk a little bit about editing, for editing the voice track. This is what you're looking at here is a voice track, and I'll play this in a minute. But I also want to get into discussing some aspects of production, and specifically how you use music to affect the emotional response in your audience, how music can affect the outcome of your production. So I've got a couple of different examples of different types of music that I was testing for this project, and then I'll show you the final project that I used. Now, this particular project is for a local production called the Holiday Magic CD. So if you go to the website holidaymagiccd.org, and I think they also have .com, but if you go to that website, you'll find out all about what this production is all about. Basically what it is, it's a project that a guy named Jeff Gelder started 22 years ago. As it was part of a class that he was taking, and his instruction was to come up with some kind of a business model that could be sustained and take on a life of its own. So he got, Jeff is a voice actor, just like Jodina and myself, and he had a whole bunch of voice actor friends around the country, so he got an idea, well, why don't I put together a CD of voiceover stories about Christmas and the holidays that are motivating and encouraging, and then distribute that to kids who are stuck in the hospital over the holidays. And that project just took off, and I forget how many countries he's in now, and it's like several hundred hospitals that he distributes to. And he created an ongoing storyline. So there's a full cast dialogue story that goes from beginning to end, and they're like 3 to 5 minute segments. And then when there would normally be a commercial break, instead of having commercials, that's where he puts in stories from other voice talent, sometimes music, songs that are created originally for this whole project. And the whole thing comes out to be about an hour 15 minutes. It's a fun thing to listen to, and it's really designed for kids that are stuck in hospitals. But you can listen to some of the previous programs on the website. I do the narration on the story, so I'm the narrator that ties the story together. And I also do the audio production for some of the segments that are submitted. So if a voice actor submits a dry voice track as a story, which is what this one is, and if Jeff feels it needs some production value, he sends it to me and says, okay, Jim, work your magic. So then I take that and I figure out what to do with it to really bring it to life through editing and production and using music and sound effects. So that's basically what I'm going to show you about this today. So what we're looking at here is the original dry voice track. And let me take this back to the original file. This is how the file originally arrived.
Visit from St. Nicholas. A visit from St. Nicholas.
Oops, okay, I've got enough extra track running there that I don't want.
In hopes.
Okay, so notice how low the volume is on that.
The children were nestled all snug in
And if you look at the meters, this is barely coming in at -18. So the original audio on this was submitted at a very low level of recording. So one of the first things I need to do is to bring it up to a volume where I can work with it. And that's called, the easiest way to do that is called normalization. And what normalization does is it looks for the highest spike in the audio, which is like, if we're looking at this section here, that little spike right there is what it's going to look at for adjusting the volume of that particular section. I don't know if that's exactly the loudest one or not. Actually, no, because here's something down here that looks like it's actually louder. And so with normalization, It's a process that is every workstation has it. And I have it on a keyboard command, but if I was to do this, I would come into my switches here and come down and look for normalize and normalize this. So notice when I click normalize, it brings the audio up overall, the whole volume of the whole recording. So this level that it brought it up to is something that can be adjusted and preset within the software settings. And I have this set for, I think, -6 dB, which I need to do a little bit of a digression here. How many of you, or have you covered the dB range on digital?
A little bit, but talk about it.
Okay, so with digital audio works very different from analog audio. I'm sure you've all seen pictures of what's called a VU meter. That's that little meter that's got kind of a curve in it, and there's a needle that is bouncing back and forth. That's called a VU meter, or volume unit meter. That was the standard for measuring the volume of analog audio. So that meter had a scale in that little curve, that little arc. And that scale started about -20, and then it was black all the way up to then -3, 2, 1, 0, and then it was red for +1, +2, and +3. So the general idea of that is that when we are recording audio, we want that needle to be averaging at about 0. It can occasionally go into the red, but we try to avoid that and just keep it averaging at 0. And that was called 0 VU, 0 volume units. And that 0 point actually, if you really want to get anybody technical in here? Anybody have any techno geeks? Okay. Okay, so for the techno geek in the audience, that 0 VU is a specific voltage. I think it's 0.775 volts at 1,000 kilohertz on a steady. You have 1,000 hertz tone going in there, and you adjust that to 0.775 volts, and that was your 0 VU. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of electronics that gets into audio, most of which I don't really care about, because my philosophy is if it sounds good, it's good. I do know a little bit about the electronics, but enough to be dangerous. So anyhow, that 0 VU is where we want to average our audio level. Okay, so now enter digital audio. Oh, by the way, I just want to point out, going back to analog for a second, that -20 is -20 dB. A decibel is a specific measure. It's an electronic measurement of sound. So decibels are measured as a logarithmic progression. So it's not, you go up 1 dB and you've actually doubled, go up 2 dB and you've tripled. That's not how it works. Each step is 10 times. So -20 is really, really low in terms of volume as compared to 0. The average decibel of a quiet room, this is not a quiet room because we've got a lot of air conditioners going on, but if there was no air conditioning and this room was completely quiet, the average decibel level in this room would be about probably around -60, -65, maybe -55, someplace in that range, which is really, really low. It's very quiet. So, in fact, if you are working in a recording studio, the average decibel rating in a recording studio is about -70. So it's very, very quiet. And it progresses up and gets louder, going up to 0. As you go above 0, the VU meter had +1, +2, and +3. And then usually above +3, there's this little red light that would pop on, which would blink occasionally. That red blinky light was usually set for about +18, +18, +20, in that neighborhood. So if your audio was in the red and that red light was blinking, that meant one of these spikes had reached plus 18, plus 20, whatever it was set for. Okay, so minus 65 to about plus 18 would be the total range of that. That's a really broad range of audio levels. When digital came along, they needed to figure out how are we going to measure this digital signal. So what they decided is, okay, we need to pick a point at which the digital audio in a computer, a basic computer, can no longer process that signal. And what they determined that to be was about, what they did is they looked at audio and they cranked it up. I'm kind of just giving a simplified version of this, but what they did is they increased the audio until they saw the waveform start to no longer be a common curve, but it started to flatten out. And unlike analog, where if you get too loud, the audio distorts, with digital, if you get too loud, you actually lose data, because digital audio is all data. So they looked at it until the waveform flatlined, and then they backed that off until it retains the curve. And they said, okay, that's how loud it needs to be. What's the electronic voltage? They looked at their electronic voltage stuff, and they figured, okay, well, that's about plus 18 dB. So what they did is I figured, okay, this is the ceiling. We cannot go any higher than this before we get to distortion. So we're going to make that 0. We cannot go above 0. If we go above 0, we're clipping. The audio is going to get degraded. Okay, so then it looked at compared that plus 18, compared that back to the old analog days of 0 VU, and plus 18 was where things started to distort. So they figured, oh, okay, we now need to average our levels in audio at around minus 18. That's going to be the equivalent of 0 VU. So that's where that comes from. So when you're recording audio, we want to average our level around minus 18. Actually, there are other specifications that goes, if any of you use ACX or Audible audiobooks, listen to any of those? A couple of you do? Okay. ACX, which is the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is part of Amazon and Audible, has specific standards for the creators of audiobooks. And they want the average audio level for an audiobook to be at minus 23. So even lower than that average, with spikes going no higher than minus 6. Or I'm sorry, minus 6 digital. So that means the average audio is going to be a little bit under that 0 VU point. But that creates a very consistent standard for audiobooks, so that when you're listening to one audiobook and you change to a different one, it's not all of a sudden you're going to get a lot louder. So that's the ACX standard. Yes?
What's the name of the software again? It's Audiobooks Exchange?
ACX.com is the website for creating audiobooks, and there's got a whole bunch of instructions on how to go through that audiobook creation process. But yeah, ACX.com is the Audiobook Creation Exchange, and it's part of Audible.
May I say one thing?
Yes.
You were talking about the importance of the sound effects and bringing the movie alive.
Yes.
There is a book that I got a peek on. It's called "Music is the Soul of the Cinema."
Mm-hmm.
You can find it on Amazon. It tells the story of the usage of music from the cinema when there was no talking till now.
Right.
And it's very beneficial, I think, if we...
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about music in just a minute here. We're going to get into that, so you'll really be able to hear how music makes a big difference in the final production. But getting back to this project, no, that was great, love it. This is the voice track for the project, and what I wanted to show you here is how some things affect the volume of this. So it's actually fairly low. There is another one here. This is the same voice track. I'm going to mute the top one. This is the same voice track, but this is processed. Where are we here? Oh, there we go.
Snow, the stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth.
So this voice track, this is the actual edited voice track, and I'm going to show you about that in just a sec. But this particular voice track is compressed. Have you covered audio compression at all? A little bit. Okay. So what audio compression does is it takes the basic waveform and scrunches it. It compresses it, just like, you know, if you have a soda can and you put your foot on it, you're compressing that can. The can hasn't changed, you're just making it smaller. And in the case of audio, what we do is we compress the audio, which makes it louder, has an apparent loudness change. You're not actually making it louder, but by compressing it, you're bringing the lower volume up and making it closer to the loud parts. So that's what the difference is here. You know, I use a little program called Wavehammer, which is a really simple program that I like to use. And I'll just play a little section of this with and without. So this is the original audio that came in.
Beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth.
Okay, so do you hear the difference with the compression?
Like a wreath.
Stop that. Do you hear the difference when I switched in the compression? It all of a sudden got louder. So that's what compression does. It's just tightening the sound. It's bringing the low volume up. Now the opposite of compression is called limiting. Limiting takes the loud parts and keeps the loud parts at a specific maximum volume. So it's going to prevent distortion. So it's like a really fast hand on the volume knob. So when the sound gets too loud, the software automatically turns it down. And compression is kind of like the same thing in reverse. If the volume is too soft, compressor turns it up. So that's just the real basics of limiting and compression. With this track here,
He had a broad face.
I have that track already set up for this production, and I have compressed the audio. It did not need any limiting, so I don't have to do that because this woman's voice was very consistent, but it did need to be tightened up in order to mix properly with the music and sound effects that I've added to this. So a couple of things I want to point out on this voice track. And that is, if we look at the two, these are both the same voice track. But you'll notice that in the purple one, what I've done is spaced things out. So there are edits here in the edited voice track. The original voice track, which is this one up at the top,
'Twas the night before Christmas.
at the lower volume, this is not processed. This is the original audio track.
Not even.
Unedited. You know, they're roughly the same length. The edited version stretches things out a little bit, but you'll understand in just a minute as I get into the production side of this why these edits occurred. But before I get into too much detail on that, I wanted to show you the music aspects of this. So I have three different sections of music. They're color-coded on the screen so you can easily see what they are. And I have these grouped. This is another thing that your workstations can do, is you can group tracks in so that they have a common functionality. Like this group here that's all, well, I'll start with the blue one at the bottom. I have a couple of tracks here which are both in group. What are these? Both in group, where are you? Both group D. So if up on my master, I can listen to group D. This is my bus for group D. I add it to a bus. Do you all know what a bus is? Technical term. And it's not transportation. Okay, what a bus is in audio or video, a bus is, it's like an additional track, but you can actually group tracks into a bus. So how can I say this? Okay, so you've got a bucket here, and you're going to take three things. You have item A, B, and C, and each of them is completely separate, but you want to be able to work with them all at the same time. So you take all three of those, put them into this bucket. The bucket's like a bus. So that's what I've done here is I've taken these audio tracks and I have put them into bus D, as in dog, and then I have up here, I have bus D, where I can mute that entire bus. So if I want to listen to just that music,
A visit from St. Nicholas.
I can mute the dialogue, which is in bus A, and here we can listen to this bus. This is the yellow bus, and this is the pink bus up here. So we can selectively choose what we want to work with. So right now I'm going to work with bus D because I want to show you what happens when we take bus D and put the dialogue with it. I'm not going to get into a lot of editing of the dialogue, but I will show you a couple of things about editing that you need to know. But I wanted to mainly show you how the music works with this. And how are we doing on time, Judina?
We'll take a break in about 6 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so that'll work. Okay, so let me play this. This is with this particular set of music.
A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care.
Okay, so dramatic music. You know, it's a really dramatic version of Jingle Bells. And it works okay. But as we go along, we're telling the story. Come back up here and look at the dialogue. So as we're telling the story, there are transitions within the voice track.
Here, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there, the children were nestled all snug in their beds.
Okay, so within the story, we're talking about St. Nicholas, and then we're talking about the kids. So, you know, maybe we need something to change there in the storytelling, because everything we do is about storytelling.
In their beds, and Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter.
Okay, so there's another transition that happens there. So putting it with this, the blue music track, if I'm listening to this,
A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all...
okay, so that works out okay, because I've got this nice flourish in the music and then a downbeat on the voice track. So that's working okay.
All through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar...
Okay, so this part of the music really doesn't work. The music is too heavy, it's too dramatic. We're talking about kids nestled in their bed. That's not working. So I would want to find something different for that piece of music. So let's go into a different track. Let's go into the yellow ones here. Let me bring this up a little bit. So let's bring those down. Let's expand these guys a little bit. Okay, so with these here, I rebuilt some things. I've used a different piece of music at the very beginning, and we've got some different transitions. So let's hear how this one tells the story. Oops, let's get back into get the voice track back in. I had muted that.
visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
Okay, so first thing you notice, the really heavy jingle bells was very dramatic. This has got kind of a Caribbean beat to it. Maybe works, maybe a little. I mean, it's got a whole different mood and tone to telling the story. But what happens as we get further into it, into some of those transition places?
Danced in their heads, and Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter.
Okay, so that transition with this piece of music, and I'd pre-selected these musics, so it would take too long for me to go through the whole music search process here. But I'd already figured out which pieces of music might work in this piece, because I was experimenting. And a lot of audio post-production is about experimenting, just testing to see what's going to be the strongest, what's going to be the best way to do this. So with this particular piece here, one thing I wanted to show you is, notice where the beats in the music fall in relation to the voice track.
Our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window, I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash.
Okay, so that dramatic music is working okay there. Let's go a little bit further down.
I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet.
Okay, so hear how the dramatic transition between here.
He must be St. Nick.
Did you add any transition between the music? Or just you put them on top of each other?
It's a different section of the music. In fact, nope, it's just a hard edit.
Yeah. And may I ask one question?
Yes.
What volume do you keep the music with the voiceover to be good? Is there a rule for that?
On average, I try to keep my music balance about 12 dB below voice track.
12 dB.
About 12 minus 12. So if I've got my voice track at 0, my music's going to be about minus 12. Generally, I'll use my ears, and I use my ears in 3 ways. I've only got 2 ears, but I use it 3 ways. First thing, I'll listen on monitor speakers. So I have my monitors up at a good listening volume, and I want to listen to the music and make sure that the music is not fighting the voice track. I don't want it too low. I don't want it too loud. I want the music to be at there's one spot in there where the music just fits and it feels right. Okay, once I find that on my speakers, now I'm going to dim the speakers. So I either this software has a little button where I can just click on the button and it drops the volume 10 dB. So it brings the volume way down. Or I can just turn it down on my volume control. But by dimming the volume, what that does is it allows me to listen to that mix with a different perspective. So I'm no longer listening to it at full volume. I'm now listening to it a lot softer. But by listening to it softer, I can tell if the music is getting lost. If the music's getting lost, I might need to compress the music to tighten the music up so that it fits better with the voice track. Again, that's a technique thing that we play with it and experiment, see, okay, what does it need in order to sound its best? And the third way of listening to it is on headphones. I will listen to using a good pair of headphones, not earbuds. Earbuds are trash when it comes to mixing audio. So when you're working with audio, find a good pair of headphones. Usually plug-in corded headphones are going to be the best because you're not going to have any interference. Bluetooth headphones Maybe, but usually what I found, Bluetooth headphones are designed for listening to music, not for production. So they're usually going to have some kind of a low frequency enhancement, so which is going to give you a stronger bottom end in the audio, and they're just not going to be as useful. So try and find good headphones. If you really want to go professional and you want really good headphones, the Sony 7506 is the brand of headphones to look at. Sony 7506. They're about $90 to $110 depending upon where you get them. Amazon's always got them at a good price. But those are the headphones I use. So those are the standard of the industry. Yes, Janina, good price. Perfect. Okay, we'll take a quick break. I'm going to get on the internet and show you some other stuff. Okay, we're all back. Yay. Okay, good. This is my website, the sigmamedia.com site that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to come back to this in a second and play this video, which is on the homepage. But before that, I wanted to get back into what we were talking about with this music. So there's something really important when it comes to music and music editing. So I want you to listen to the transition just in the music. I'm going to mute the voice track, so just listen to the music, the way these two pieces come together. Now these are actually two different music tracks. This one at the bottom it's a Epic Jingle Bells is what that one's called, and this one is We Three Kings. And these are both from a music library called Digital Juice. So with these two music tracks, listen to the way that we transition from this track into the second one, and then back out into the third one, which is another part of the We Three Kings. Okay, so here's the transition. Okay, so two things to notice. On the first part of the transition, this downbeat occurs at the right place. There's a bum-bum-bum-bum-bum downbeat. So the tempo works okay for that. However, at the second, when it's exiting from that second piece into the third piece, notice that it's off. And you can tell by looking at the waveform where the beats are. In the bottom track here, here's the downbeat, and here's the downbeat on this track. So really, to make these work, these would need to be lined up about like that. But what does that do at the beginning? Not too bad, but I want to make it even stronger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up this downbeat here with this downbeat here and come into the back end. And not quite sure what that is. I'll listen to it and we'll see what happens here. Okay, so this note here and this note here appear to be almost the same note. So there are a couple of things I can do. I can slide this third piece, move it forward a little bit to line up, but then that's going to throw off any other music edits I already have in place. Or, and this is something that I usually save this as a last resort, but there's a nifty little thing that you can do with most digital editors, and that's called it's basically called a time shift, where I can take this event and I can stretch it. So I'm just basically changing the time relationship of that event, making it faster or slowing it down. So I'm slowing it down just a hair so that this beat and this beat coincide. And if we're lucky, we won't be able to hear any difference.
Doesn't it really get slower?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, the question was, doesn't it make it slower? And that's the whole idea, is I slowed down this particular track so I had my beats at the beginning and at the end coordinated so that they both hit at the right place. In fact, I'm a little bit off here, so I can adjust that just a tad more so these two downbeats line up.
And what is the name of the tool that you use?
It's just, it's built into the software, and it's a time compression or time shift. In Vegas, the way it works is I just simply click on the end of the event, hold down my control key. Oops, let me get back to where I need to be. And I can adjust the timing. I'm using control. I don't know what.
On Adobe Audition, it looks like a little clock. It's that one that it's like a little clock that when you do exactly what James was doing, you'll see you fly over it and there's a little clock.
Yeah, so you can adjust the timing on a particular event. And then what I'm going to do, because if I just listen to this alone, see, it kind of ends abruptly. And it's got that little piccolo trill there. I don't want that. So I'm going to shorten this event so I get out before that, and then I'm going to put in a fade. Where are we? There we are. I'm just going to fade that out. So now this second piece. Okay, so that fades out, but when I put it with this, the bottom track has a sharp attack. And it's the same note. So what's going to happen is it's going to sound like it's all one piece. So you can't hear the edit. So again, it's a little bit of experimenting and playing with what you can do with the different tracks. But I want to get back into, I'm going to mute this out. I want to get into what I actually used on the full project. And this is what's going to be on the project that appears this year. It'll be on the Holiday Magic CD when it comes out. And I want to make sure I'm on B. Everything is B is unmuted. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so after experimenting with the different music tracks to go along with this, how this woman told the story, what I chose was what's in the pink tracks here. Let me make sure those are muted. Yes, they are. Good. And there were even some options with this that I will show you. Let me see where I am here. Nope, okay, I need to unmute those two as well. That one and that one stays muted. Yeah, I had a different option on this, so I'm not gonna play the whole thing for you, but I'll play parts. I'll spot check it a little bit through. But listen to how it starts off. Let's unmute the voice track.
A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his course as they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As the leaves that before.
Okay, so hear how the music transitions totally support what's happening in the story. And that's what we want to strive for. Is we want to have that connection between the music and the way the story is being told. And that could mean music. You might need to edit music, transition between different pieces of music, which is what I've done here. You may even need to edit the voice track to space it out, which happens a little bit later on. One thing I did want to show here is I had an option on this, which is these pieces here. So in place of this one little section, I did have another option, which was this here.
More rapid than eagles his course as they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As the
So it's not as cleanly edited right now because I chose to not use that one. I like the way this music felt.
more rapid.
The lighter tones and the lighter melody line felt like it worked better for that section of the story. But I want to show you what happens down at the end here. Also, there's one little piece in here.
Horses they flew with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then
So this, what I'm doing, showing you here is this little effect here. All that is it's a cymbal flare, and without it, let me play this transition real quick. This is what the transition between these two pieces of music sounds like without the flare.
they meet with an obstacle mountains.
And that's okay, but what I wanted is I wanted to have it a little more dramatic. So I found the cymbal flare, and this is what happens. Excuse me. But notice how that, just that little the little flare of the cymbal heightens the emotional connection of that transition in the music. And it helps bridge it into the lighter flute. This is without. So that's, again, something to play with and experiment with. So here's where some sound effects come in. And notice that the voice track is edited. And this is how the edits work with the music and with the sound effects.
And a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word.
So again, this little piece here is just a little tree bell effect, but it serves to transition between the two pieces of music. And technically, this music edit might be a little off. Yeah, technically that could be a bit off. The downbeat might be a little bit off, but the tree bell kind of hides that.
He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned, gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle.
Okay, so here's where the voice track editing really comes into play, is I'm editing the voice track to fit with the punctuations in the music.
Whistle.
So there's the whistle, the arpeggio on the music track.
And away they all flew like the down of a thistle.
And then there's this downbeat on the music here, and I let that establish.
But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
So it's just adjusting the timing in the voice track so that it helps tell the story better and it doesn't rush things. Okay, any questions on how all that goes together? So you've all got it. You can now edit highly professional voice tracks and music. Any questions on anything? Yes?
Where did you get the sound effects from? Did you get it from a specific library?
I have a huge sound effects library that I will pull from, but a lot of times I'll just go up to YouTube. Sometimes I just type in what's the sound effect I want, and it'll be on YouTube, or I'll just do a Google search. There are tons of places to get free sound effects online. But yeah, when I download sound effects off of YouTube, they go in my library. So I've got those. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How much of this is like a collaborative type of like thing? Do you ever bounce ideas off of someone, or is it just you and your computer?
It's mostly me and my computer. And yeah, I'll bring Charlene in occasionally just to, get another point of view on the project or the mix. And sometimes she'll say, "Well, that music sucks. Use something different." but most of the time I'm the one that's in isolation, spending hours playing with this stuff, and a lot of times under headphones, so I don't bother anybody else in the house. Yes, over here.
What do you do when you're using like a song that's like not yours or from like your library?
I only work with music libraries that I have access to. There are places on YouTube that have free music, but some of that's kind of questionable. There are places that you can go online which have AI creation for music. Again, that's kind of questionable. A lot of places won't use anything that uses AI. But there are dozens of production music libraries out there, and that's what I use. I have about 8 or 10 libraries I work with.
Okay, but what about like a popular song that you want to have in like?
If you're doing it for your own personal enjoyment, fine, go for it.
To like put out there.
Nope, don't do it. Copyright infringement. Yeah, you can, if you want to pay the royalties and arrange for the copyright clearance. That'll cost you probably a couple $1,000, but you can use it. But yeah, most of the time, if the music is popular music, if it's copyrighted, if you use it for anything commercial or that's going to be for public distribution, you stand a really good chance of either getting it banned from wherever you're trying to post it. The legal way is to track down who owns the copyright. There are companies out there that is their specific business, and but they're going to charge you through the nose. It will not be cheap, especially if it's a very popular piece of music. Yes.
Just to kind of let you guys know too, my girlfriend and I had a videographer that wanted to promote himself a little bit, so they did a story of me and my sailing, and this guy said that this music track is fine, go ahead and put it out there. So we put it on YouTube, and it was during COVID, and we got sued. So it probably got a couple hundred, like it wasn't a huge thing, it was maybe 200 hits or something that they saw. But they went after us, and it was was like tens of thousands of dollars. So luckily my girlfriend had errors and omissions insurance for her company, so we hired a lawyer, a friend of mine that's a lawyer in the East Coast, and he defended us, but still it was like, I mean, it's a huge hassle, so do not pirate
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Just
No,
don't
I'm
even
talking
chance it.
about the legal way. I'm talking
Yeah, no,
about
do
the
the-
proper way to go through, like getting the music. All these movies that we watch all have like popular songs that we know.
Yeah, and they're paying, they're paying through the nose to use that music. They are paying huge fees. Yeah, there are companies, if you just write, if you do a Google search for music rights companies, that should bring up the resources for that.
Is it cheaper to make your own music or?
Yeah, if you make your own music, you're the creator, and you own the copyright to it if you're the one that's created the tune. Just be careful you're not duplicating riffs from somebody else. Yeah, over there.
Yeah, so, Scandal, those shows Scandal, like all the music in there are old records.
Yep.
You know, so that does that mean that they're paying a whole lot to use, like they use several,
Depends upon how old the music is.
it's really old, like back in the 70s or something.
70s is really old. No, 70s is not really old. No, copyright runs, I think it's 100 years past the death of the composer. So, yeah, they're paying a lot.
Shonda Rhimes paid a lot to get she's playing all kinds of records.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, okay, there are two primary music rights organizations in the U.S. One is called ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. The other one is called BMI, which is Broadcast Music, Inc. Both of those organizations handle different artists. So you'd need to find out who is the artist, the composer or performer, who are they affiliated with? So where is that particular piece of music held? You know, which organization controls that piece of music? It's either ASCAP or BMI, or it's the composer themselves. But anything that's commercially released is going to be either ASCAP or BMI. And then it's a matter of contact that organization and find out, okay, here's what I want to use the music for, and they will say, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. You know, that's one way of doing it. My former partner and I produced 5 international voiceover conventions, and we had music played as part of the convention. So we had to get ASCAP BMI licensing in order to have music performed at our events. So dealing with music is not fun. If you can create it, if you have a friend who's a musician and that can, throw something together, that's definitely the way to go, especially for a small independent production. Or working with somebody who has access to music libraries like I do. I've got about 10 music libraries I work with. All the music in this project is from 1 or 2 different music libraries. So, and the music libraries, I have complete rights to use anything in those libraries for anything I want to use them for.
What's the typical cost if you want to get a music library? Is there a big fee?
Libraries work in different ways. Most of the time, the royalty-free buyout libraries, which means you're going to pay a fee to use a piece of music in a project or a particular type of project, and the fee might vary depending upon what the project is. If it's audio only, it might be one price. If it's for a feature film, it could be a different price. The library track, they're called a needle drop or a laser drop fee, and they'll vary anywhere from about $35 for some libraries on up to a couple hundred. Just it depends on what the music is and what it's being used for. Yes.
You know the best software app to use to make your own music for
If you want to create your own music, Audacity actually has an AI music creator as part of the new version, if you have Audacity. But there are a couple of websites out there where you can type in a description and it will create music tracks for you. These are AI based, so I wouldn't recommend using them for anything that's going to get posted on a police. Yeah, jump in.
Since we have it, we have GarageBand.
Yeah.
And all
That's
kinds of great
Apple, yeah.
stuff on GarageBand, and you've got access to it.
Yeah.
What about Cakewalk?
Well, Cakewalk, that's MIDI. That's MIDI software. So
It doesn't create. It
no,
doesn't
you'd have
now?
as I used Cakewalk probably 20 years ago. It's been around a while.
It's no longer popular.
I don't know. When I used Cakewalk, it was for MIDI, which is musical instrument digital interface, and that's where basically you have a keyboard and you can program the sounds into your keyboard and you play the music.
Notes for you.
Yeah, it's for your own music creation.
Oh,
And Cakewalk is like the editing software for MIDI. But, yeah. Yes,
Watch, we'd like to.
yeah. Let me get to the video. Let me answer one last question here. Yes.
For public domain stuff, right? Is there a specific place you source them from, or is it you just randomly find out like YouTube or something like that?
Well, for public domain, yeah, you could probably type in public domain music. I don't use public domain because public domain music is, we're talking like the 1930s and 40s. So it's not going to, if it's for a specific type of a theme, yeah, it could work. But, you'll still need to verify that it is actually out of copyright. And yeah, it's tricky finding that stuff. It's probably not worth the time and energy to do it unless it's critical to your piece, your project. Yeah, one last question, then I'll play the demo.
I think a lot of it can be, I don't want to say avoided, but don't you get a little bit more of a break using real music when you credit and like source where you're getting the music from? Like, let's say I make a video and I'm playing a song and I have my own audio like track of like the ambiance where I'm at. If I just place in the corner the name and music label of whatever is playing, doesn't that, no?
Nope. Now, there are libraries that are called attribution libraries where they will let you use their music for free in a production with attribution, which is what you're describing there. But in terms of commercially recorded music, attribution doesn't apply.
Oh, so commercially is implying that I'm getting money from it?
Commercially, meaning that it's been released by a record company, that it's, you'll hear on radio, on the internet, that it's a known artist. Those are commercially produced, it's commercially released, and those are the things that are going to really get you caught up in copyright violations if you use them. But if you go to a music library that's an attribution library, and you can provide the proper attribution for it, yeah, you could use that, but make sure that you have the documentation that they provide in case you ever get called. Because you want to be able to say, well, no, hey, I had the license for attribution rights. Here's the project. Shows the attribution. So I did the credit, and they gave me the right to use their music. Yeah, but music is a boy. I mean, you're walking on coals with music. It can be really tricky. Okay, I'll take another question or two after this, but I want to show you.
Yeah, you guys. James is willing to stay longer, so after he shows us what
Yeah.
he did with some of the movies, if you guys want to stay longer, if you would stay.
I will stay.
For more questions.
I will stay
I don't
until
want to do more questions.
I'll stay until you throw me out. Okay, so this is, as I mentioned earlier, Sigma Media is my production company website. And you'll notice that CIGMA is the word magic turned inside out. Because this all goes back to my heritage. You notice the little magical top hat there. But this is my audio post-production demo, which is on the home page of the website.
To produce the intended result. Remember, we talked about risks and outcomes. How about knowing you've got the power? When these things come up.
Hi. What are you doing here?
I had nowhere else to go.
This whole thing's so weird. Hey. What are you doing here?
I had nowhere else to go.
This whole thing's so weird.
Now, of course, I consider teaching as a good class. That's what I couldn't do in high school.
This is the film that we had to ADR the entire film.
Jane is a friend of mine.
But a gay class in Livingston? I mean, who'd sign up? The only course I consider teaching is a gay lit class. It's what I couldn't do in the high school.
The dean is a friend of mine.
But a gay class in Livingston? I mean, who'd sign up? Well, I guess that's everyone. I'm Richard Hall. Call me Richard. We're going to be exploring thousands of years of gay and lesbian literature together.
I have no money for books. Neither does William.
Well, I guess that's everyone. I'm Richard Hall. Call me Richard. We're going to be exploring thousands of years of gay and lesbian literature together.
I have no money for books. Neither does William.
Anyone who's aspiring conservationist today needs to remember you never give up. Anyone who's aspiring conservationist today needs to remember you never give up.
Jesus, Blake, what the hell are you doing?
I got you, bitch. Don't move. Easy now.
This is just great. Now you both got guns. Jesus, Blake, what the hell are you doing?
I got you, bitch. Don't move. Easy now.
This is just great. Now you both got guns. Jesus, Blake, what the hell are you doing?
I got you, bitch. Don't move. Easy now.
This is just great. Now you both got guns.
There's a fence on the east bend by the Miller's Land that needs fixing.
Well, I better come with you and make sure
Oh, come on. Let me do it, Pop. Let me do it this time.
Well, here, take this.
Homework.
It's gonna get cold tonight.
There's a fence on the east bend by the Miller's Land that needs fixing.
Well, I better come with you and make sure
Oh, come on. Let me do it, Pop. Let me do it this time.
Well, here, take this.
Homework.
It's gonna get cold tonight.
Okay. I've got elevator control, little to no heading control. Not on center line. I'm offset starboard. Okay. I've got elevator control, little to no heading control. Not on center line. I'm offset starboard.
Julie, hi. Pick him head on. Lead shooting out of range. I think I got the wingman.
Oh, Delano, we got him. We just got another one. Who is this kid?
Okay, so that gives you an idea of what I do. Any questions?
Could you briefly talk about some of the things you did to go from the original audio to, for example, when the two guys were on the horse and it was raw and there was no ambient noise
Sure.
and things like that? Could you talk about what you did with Gavin, with Boy?
Okay, so for that scene, that was from a movie or short. If I come over here into the Our Work section, come down into section here. Okay, that was this particular project here called Once. Yeah, it's going to take a moment to load in. Once Guilty, Now Innocent, but Still Dead, which is actually based on a true story. We shot that out in Ramona, back in the farm country, way back out there. And the father and the son we had the horses there, and the father and the son were both body mic'd. You know, they had their own wireless microphones, and there was no wind to speak of. It was a little bit of a breeze because you could see the trees moving a little bit, but not a lot of wind. It was really quiet. So got a nice clean recording from both of them. But when we got into post-production, after the post-production happens usually after the video is edited. So the director and editor cut the film, and they had the scene cut the way they wanted it, but it was just flat, just dead, no life to it at all. So what I did is I took their original audio, cleaned it up a little bit, and then I went into my sound effects library and I found the sound of sheep, sheep buying, added that in, and if you listen to the clip again, you'll notice that the sheep sounds are timed out so that they fill in the holes between dialogue. So they're put in a very specific places. And the same thing with the wind. The wind is adjusted so that it flows with whatever the trees are doing. And that's all done by just, adjusting the tracks in a video project, like I was showing you earlier. So let's see, this is the project. There were a lot of different things. You can go on the website and look at this. Notice the clock down at the bottom here. That's called time code.
How they say to somehow operation bullet. And all these cute.
And I think that particular scene that I used in the clip was early on. Yeah, it's in here someplace. Yeah, there it is.
So big. I look like a child.
And when we shot this, we did probably, I think, 3 or 4 takes of this particular scene. And when the kid says this is so big, that was in a different take from what this was actually used. But he's got his back to the camera, so he can't see his mouth. And I felt that as I was editing the audio, I felt that particular part of the scene lagged. It needed something. And I had that ad lib from him from a previous take. I pulled that audio out of the other take, plugged it into here, and it just helped establish the kid's discomfort with wearing his dad's jacket, you might say. So that actually gets into one of the important things about audio production, especially when you're working with film, is you need to understand what is the emotion that's taking place in the scene, and then adapt the sound effects and the music. Everything goes towards supporting that emotion or the emotional response you want to get from the audience. And I keep that always in mind anytime I'm working on a post-production scene.
Let me do it this time.
So notice how the sheep.
It's gonna get cold tonight. Go on.
So big. I look like a child.
That was all ad lib from the other scene.
Have a good dinner.
I want you to get back here as soon as you can.
All right.
And if you listen to it under really good conditions, you'll hear the horse walking, and all the horse hoofs were laid in as post-production also, because we didn't have the horse mic'd. But if you go to the website, you can watch any of these. These are all full-length shorts, a couple of feature films in here. Which one is it? Angel Mountain I think that's currently on Tubi, so you can actually watch it on Tubi. And there's another show on Tubi that I don't have it on the website because it's actually still in release, which is called It's All Right Now, and that one's also on Tubi. Any other questions? Nobody has a question? Okay.
May I suggest one thing? Do you think you can tell them about the Burn Treaty that talks about the copyright, that it's like it includes like a big amount of members from all around the world to keep the copyright of the production or the music or the invention or the artwork. I don't know if they know about it. The Bern Treaty. It was made in history in 19.
Well, actually, Taj, you're going to do a little module for us. So
because it's the United States joined it in 1989, and it was made by many countries around the world that they preserve the copyright law.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are in this treaty, it's you are like committing to keep the copyright of all the people that does any invention or creation, and it includes all the know-how. It should be preserved, or for how long, like if it should be in public domain or no, for how long that it falls later in the public domain, all these things.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I've only dealt with I've mostly deal with music libraries. So
years. After 17 years,
mm-hmm.
anything that is created falls in the public domain. However, you cannot change in it. You are allowed to use it, but you're not allowed to change it.
So you can't do any derivative works on it. So yeah, I'm not really familiar with what that is. So I'd have to research that one. Yes, sir.
As for how do you get gigs to be able to work for some company? Are you independent, or are you under?
No, I'm totally independent.
So do you reach out to
Yep.
certain studios? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the projects that you see on the screen here were with one particular director
Mm-hmm.
that I worked with a lot several years ago. This is all pre-COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she has since moved. I think they're currently in Texas. But the most recent film I worked with her, she was in Alabama. Everything was shot back in Alabama. That's where, remember the scene with the two girls in the back of the grocery store talking? That was from a film called It's All Right Now. And that film was shot in Alabama, and that scene had to be ADR'd because there was no way I just couldn't clean up the audio. So we had to redo the voice track on that whole scene. And the way we did that was I did it actually over a Zoom connection, which was not ideal, but it was the only way we could do it. And it worked. They recorded their dialogue in their studio. We had a video connection, so they could see my video playback over Zoom, and they could lip sync to the lines that they did earlier, recording it at their end, and then they sent me the audio file, and I had to resynchronize everything at my side. But that's how it all came together. Jodina, yes.
Alex brings up an excellent question, because this is, our whole department falls under career technical education, so it's all about getting a job,
Mm-hmm.
making money doing this. So if you could talk just a little bit about how not only the movies and the videos, but the audio, the voiceover, and it's funny because it all kind of started with one funnel, but then you branched out and have many funnels
Mm-hmm.
into your bank account. Could you, in 5 minutes, kind of sum that up or talk about how you approach getting clients?
Okay, I'll just line it up by a catchphrase that has changed. Originally, the catchphrase it's not what you know, but who you know. That no longer applies. In today's market, it's not what you know, but who knows you. So that has changed. And in order for people to know you, you have to get out there and network, talk to people, make connections. Social media is one resource. Facebook is not a good social media for getting into production. LinkedIn is about the only social media that's going to be viable for if you're trying to get into any kind of production work. And social media can take a lot of time. not only in the process of working with the social media, but in just allowing people to get to know who you are. Personally, for me, social media is a time suck. I don't do social media. I would much rather prefer making personal connections. Because for me, that's really the only way to go. Is I want people to know who I am, to know what I can do for them that other people they know can't do. So that's really hard to communicate efficiently over social media. So as far as actually getting the work, it's, you got to put in the legwork. You got to make the connections. Don't be afraid to use the phone. I don't recommend email. Email might be a good first step, but it's not going to get you the gig 9 times out of 10. You've got to have that face-to-face and really get people to relate to you and have some kind of a connection with you. Yeah.
So you're saying what you just showed us with your website, that's somewhat a tool for you, like it's somehow like a business card of sorts. Right?
It's my electronic business card. That's it. Yep. And
I have one suggestion for everybody that I found to be exceedingly supportive, even in this modern day of social media. If you do a project with somebody and you want to have a relationship with that person, do the old-fashioned method. Who do you know that might need my services? And who would you refer me to? And would you make a recommendation on my website or your social media or wherever, so they can understand your capabilities and know that you're a real person and not some AI machine in the corner?
yeah, testimonials are incredibly useful. And on my website here's Charlene's testimonial for Sigma Media.
Jim and I worked on a number of projects. As a matter of fact, one of the most favorite projects I think we did was Jim put a P-40 airplane in his living room for me as part of, so we could film something that I needed for my military group. So yeah, we used a green screen and off we went. And Junga's really good too, John.
Yeah. The Junga the Dancing Yeti is a project. We've done 3 videos. The third one is currently in current release, so that's not on the website. But Junga is an educational anti-bullying program that's marketed to educational systems in schools. And it's been, I think we're in our 3rd year for Junga. And it's starting to really take off. It's getting a lot of coverage and a lot of exposure. The one that, this section here, these are just audio dramas. This thing, the robbery, this is what got me my first job at a recording studio. And quick story about the robbery. It only runs a couple of minutes, so if we have time, I can play it for you. But when I recorded this, I had just graduated from San Diego State. I was living at my parents' house up in La Cañada and looking to get a job at a recording studio. And there's a recording studio in every corner in Hollywood. So I was going through the phone book, calling all these places and getting nowhere. But I hit this one recording studio and I said, I'm looking for what I was looking for, a position as a recording engineer or something in the studio. And this guy said, I don't have a job for you, but I would like to hear what you've got. So let's set up an appointment. Come on down. I went down there, walked into his studio. He was on Cahuenga Boulevard, heart of Hollywood. I walked into the studio and his entire studio consisted of, he had a mixer and 2 tape decks, reel-to-reel tape decks. One was an Ampex mono, so monaural, 1 track only, and he had a 4-track Ampex. Well, I had recorded my audio knowing that I was going to recording studios, and they don't deal with quarter track, which was the consumer version of audio recording. Recording studios are 2-track, which means it's half the width of the recording tape for each track. So I knew my tape would play on his 4-track. I didn't know he had a 4-track until I walked in, but I handed him my tape. He put it up on his 4-track and played it back. And when as he was playing it, I was watching him because I'd heard the story before. So I'm watching him, and I literally saw his expression started kind of like this. Okay, I'm listening. And then he got a little more focused. And as he went through this, his jaw literally dropped. And when he finished listening, he reached over, stopped the playback, looked at me, paused, and said, "How did you do that?" Because what he had heard over his speakers was stereo, music, sound effects, dialogue, all woven together. He literally could not duplicate that in his studio because he only had a 4-track and a mono playback machine. So he could have done the components, but it would have been mono, not stereo. And he couldn't figure out how I did it. So I explained it to him and he said, "Boy, I wish I had a job for you." Then he sent me over to a place called Bell Sound Studios where I basically did the same thing. And Bill Bell hired me and I was there for about a year. I learned more at that recording studio than in all of my years in audio before then. But the robbery is that story and sound that really got me that first job. And it's only a couple minutes, about 5 minutes long. Do we have time?
And then we'll have to call, because I have to get Craig back in here to get this room back
To
together.
put it back together? Okay, let me play this for you really quick so you can hear what this story was. And this, 1972 was when I did this, and I recorded all the sound effects myself. There's some crickets that I did not record. That comes in later. The music came off of a couple of albums, commercial albums. This was my own personal demo, so no copyright issues at all. But here's what the story sounds like.
Excuse me a second, I have to get the door. Yeah, I'll be right back. Oh, glad you could make it. Yeah. Those papers you want are in my safe. I'll get them for you.
Perfect time. Perfect end. Thank you so much
Oh.
for coming and talking to our class.
My pleasure.
Maybe you'd be able to come back and do some of their work.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Love
You know,
to.
we have to talk about Podfest too.
Sure. Yeah.
So you guys, Craig's gonna come back in. We gotta get the classroom back together for our next class. But if you wanna stick around and ask James any more questions, does anybody get to stick around and ask any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you again. This was wonderful information.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, you guys on Monday.